The stars rippled like water as the massive ships tore through space itself. One by one, 300 warships emerged from the darkness, each one larger than any mountain on Earth. Their hulls were black and covered in sharp edges that seemed designed to inspire fear. These were the vessels of the Velcrin Dominion, and they had come to claim another world. Commander Taesung stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He was a tall figure with gray skin and 4 eyes that could see in spectrums humans couldn't imagine. Behind him, dozens of crew members worked at stations that glowed with alien light. Taesung looked at the blue planet hanging in the distance and felt nothing but contempt. This would be easy. It was always easy. For 300 years, the Velcrin had swept across this section of the galaxy like a storm. 47 different species had fallen before them. Some fought back with courage. Others surrendered immediately. It didn't matter. The result was always the same. The Velcrin won, and another species joined the Empire as servants and slaves. Earth would be number 40-8. Taesung pulled up the data his scouts had gathered. Humans were primitive. They had barely left their own planet. Their ships were slow and weak. Their weapons were simple explosives and crude energy beams. They had no shields worth mentioning. No allies. No chance. He turned to his communications officer. Send the standard message. They have 1 rotation of their planet to surrender. If they refuse, we burn their cities and take what we want. The message was sent in every language Earth had ever spoken. The meaning was clear. Bow down or die. On Earth, deep beneath the Swiss mountains, Lieutenant Commander Ji Woo sat at her station watching the screens. She had been monitoring deep space for 12 years, always waiting for this moment. The sensors showed the truth in cold numbers and graphs. 300 ships, each one capable of destroying a continent. Together, they could turn Earth into a dead rock in less than a day. She pressed a button on her console. Admiral, they're here. Admiral Hyen Woo walked slowly into the command center. He was 68 years old, with silver hair and a face that showed every year of stress. He had spent 3 decades preparing for this day. 3 decades building, planning, and hoping it would never come. But hope wasn't enough. It never was. He stood at the main observation deck and looked at the holographic display showing the alien fleet. Each red dot represented a ship full of weapons and soldiers who thought Earth was just another easy target. They were wrong, but they didn't know that yet. Send our response, Hyen Woo said quietly. His voice was calm, like a teacher explaining something simple to a child. Ji Woo typed quickly. The message went out on every frequency, in 47 languages, including the Velcrin's own tongue. It was short and direct. You have been warned. Leave now or face consequences beyond your comprehension. This is your final warning. In the command center, nobody spoke. Technicians worked silently at their stations. Officers stood at attention. Everyone knew what came next. They had trained for this, prepared for this. But knowing and experiencing were 2 different things. On the Eternal Conquest, the communications officer read the human message and started laughing. Soon, other crew members joined in. The sound echoed through the bridge. These primitives were threatening them, the Velcrin Dominion, the conquerors of 47 worlds. Taesung smiled, showing teeth that looked like broken glass. Humans have spirit. I'll give them that. It won't save them, but at least they'll die with pride. He turned to his tactical officer. Advance the fleet. Standard attack formation. We'll teach them the price of defiance. The 300 ships began moving forward, engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They passed the outer planets without slowing. Jupiter's great storm was just a curiosity on their sensors. Saturn's rings were barely worth noticing. They had a mission, and nothing would stop them. As they came closer to Mars, their sensors swept the inner solar system. They detected what they expected: a handful of satellites orbiting Earth and its moon, some defense stations that looked barely functional, a few ships that might charitably be called warships but seemed like toys compared to Vulcan technology. Tae-sung studied the data and nodded. Their defenses are even weaker than our intelligence suggested. This won't take long. But his tactical officer, a younger Vulcan named Zentar, stared at his screen with growing concern. "Commander, I'm detecting some anomalies. There are objects throughout the system that our sensors can't quite identify. They register as asteroids or debris, but the patterns seem organized." Tae-sung waved a hand dismissively. "Sensor echoes. This system is full of natural debris. Don't see threats where none exist." Zentar wanted to argue, but stayed quiet. You didn't question Commander Tae-sung twice if you wanted to keep your position. Still, something felt wrong. The objects were too perfectly placed, too evenly distributed. Nature wasn't that orderly. Back on Earth, Admiral Hyan-woo watched the alien fleet approach. They were moving exactly as predicted. Humanity had studied the Vulcan for 40 years, ever since the first long-range probes had detected their empire expanding toward Earth. Every battle had been recorded, every tactic analyzed, every weakness noted. The Vulcan were powerful, but they were also arrogant. They never expected real resistance. They never adapted their tactics because they never needed to. Against primitive species, overwhelming force was always enough. But Earth wasn't primitive. Not really. Humanity had simply been very careful about what they showed to the universe. Captain Minji sat at the tactical station, her fingers hovering over the controls. She was 32 years old and had spent the last 5 years programming the response protocols. Every weapon system, every defense grid, every hidden installation throughout the solar system was linked to her station. One command from her, and it would all activate. She looked at Admiral Hyan-woo. He gave her a small nod. "Not yet. Wait for the right moment." Specialist Daehan monitored the orbital platforms above Earth. To any outside observer, they looked like weather satellites and communication relays. Simple, harmless, civilian technology. He knew the truth. Each one was a weapons platform powerful enough to crack a moon in half. His screen showed green lights as each platform confirmed it was ready. All systems operational, all weapons charged, all AI targeting computers online and calculating firing solutions. The Vulcan fleet crossed Mars' orbit. Then they passed the point where Earth's moon hung in space, silver and silent. They were close now. Close enough to see the blue planet clearly. Close enough to pick their targets. Close enough to begin the slaughter they had performed 47 times before. Tae-sung leaned forward in his command chair. "Prepare weapons. Target their major population centers. We'll give them one last chance to surrender, and when they refuse, we'll..." His words stopped as every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Admiral Hyan-woo opened one final channel to the Vulcan fleet. His voice carried across space, calm and sad and absolutely certain. "You were warned." The first 3 seconds changed everything. Earth's moon, that ancient companion that had watched over humanity for millions of years, suddenly came alive. Deep beneath its gray surface, where no Vulcan sensor could detect them, massive electromagnetic coils had been buried over the course of 30 years. They had been placed carefully, hidden perfectly, waiting patiently. Now they activated. The moon didn't fire missiles or lasers. It didn't need to. The weapon it unleashed was far more terrible. Gravitational lances, beams of twisted space itself, shot out from hidden emplacements. They were invisible. They made no sound. The Vulcan sensors couldn't detect them until it was too late. The leading edge of the alien formation simply ceased to exist. 37 warships. Each one carrying 5,000 crew members, collapsed into points smaller than atoms. The metal hulls didn't explode or melt. They just compressed, faster than thought, until they became tiny singularities that blinked out of existence a fraction of a second later. On the Eternal Conquest, every screen turned red. Alarms that had never sounded in 300 years of conquest suddenly filled the bridge with their urgent screaming. Commander Taesung gripped his chair, his 4 eyes wide with disbelief. What just happened? He demanded. Where are my ships? Xantar worked frantically at his station, trying to make sense of the data. They're gone, Commander. No debris, no energy signatures. It's like they were never there. I don't understand. This technology shouldn't exist. It can exist, but it did exist. And it was just the beginning. Admiral Haiyan Wu stood motionless in the command center beneath Switzerland. Around him, dozens of officers watched their screens with grim determination. There was no cheering, no celebration. They were killing living beings, and that weight pressed down on everyone in the room. Captain Minji's hands moved across her controls with practiced precision. She had simulated this moment 10,000 times. Now it was real, and her training took over, pushing away the horror of what she was doing. Gravitational lance batteries at 97% efficiency, she reported. Her voice was steady, professional. Second wave firing solutions locked. Lieutenant Commander Ji Wu watched her sensor displays light up with new contacts. Throughout the solar system, thousands of objects that had been cataloged as asteroids, dead satellites, and space debris were suddenly moving. Power signatures appeared where there should have been none. Weapon systems came online where nothing should have existed. All hidden installations responding, Jiwoo said. The Vulcans still don't understand what they're looking at. She was right. On the Eternal Conquest, Taesung stared at his tactical display as thousands of new contacts appeared. His sensors were telling him impossible things. That asteroid near Jupiter's moon wasn't an asteroid. That piece of debris floating near Mars wasn't debris. That supposedly dead satellite had more power running through it than his flagship. They've been hiding, Juntar whispered. This whole time, they've been hiding everything. The whole system is a trap. Taesung's face twisted with rage. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Return fire. Destroy everything you see. But the Velcrum fleet was designed for attacking planets, not fighting an enemy that surrounded them on all sides. Their formations were meant to intimidate, not protect. And they were moving forward into the trap, not away from it. The asteroid belt revealed its true nature at Second 4. Hundreds of stations that had been camouflaged among the rocks suddenly activated quantum displacement cannons. These weapons were humanity's proudest and most terrible achievement. They didn't fire projectiles that traveled through space. Instead, they swapped the location of the target with superheated plasma extracted directly from the sun's corona. 42. Velcrum warships found their hulls suddenly filled with starfire. The crews had no time to scream. One moment they were at their stations, preparing to fight back. The next moment they simply stopped existing. Consumed by temperatures that could melt any known material in MICROS in Antarctica. Buried beneath 2 miles of ice, Lieutenant Su Jin watched her control panel spike with power readings. She was 29 years old and had been working on the solar collection project since she graduated from university. For 8 years, massive arrays hidden in orbit had been gathering energy from the sun, storing it in capacitor networks that could hold enough power to run a continent for a century. Now all that stored energy was being released. Solar lance batteries charging. Sujin reported over the communication network. Her hands moved efficiently across holographic controls. Primary systems at 93%. Firing solutions received and confirmed. Executing. High above Earth, what the Vulcan had catalogued as simple communication satellites suddenly unfolded like flowers. Massive lenses and focusing arrays deployed, pointing at precise coordinates in space. The stored solar energy flowed through superconducting channels and emerged as beams of concentrated light, so intense they made lightning look dim. 20-8 more. Vulcan ships died as spears of light punched through their armor like it was paper. Commander Taesun had seen war. He had commanded battles against species that fought with courage and cunning. But this was different. This wasn't a battle. It was an execution, and his fleet was the victim. Fall back. He ordered. All ships, full retreat. Get us out of here. But retreat required time, and time was something the Vulcan no longer had done at Second 7. The satellites orbiting Earth dropped their disguise completely. They weren't satellites. They were hunter-killer drones, thousands of them, each equipped with a warhead that cost more than a small country's annual budget. The drones swarmed. They moved like a school of fish, coordinating perfectly, covering every angle of escape. The Vulcan ships tried to shoot them down, but for every drone destroyed, 10 more took its place. And when the drones reached their targets, they didn't explode in the traditional sense. The warheads were matter disruption devices. They unraveled atomic bonds at the quantum level. Vulcan shields, designed to deflect energy weapons and kinetic projectiles, were completely useless. The shields couldn't stop something that was rewriting the fundamental laws of physics in a small, contained space. 98 ships came apart at the molecular level. Their atoms drifted away as clouds of disassociated matter, no longer held together by the forces that made them solid objects. On Mars, in a small observation dome, Junho watched through his telescope array. He was a civilian, a xenopsychologist who had spent 20 years studying alien cultures and behaviors. He had predicted this moment. Not the specific details, but the general pattern. The Vulcan would come. The Vulcan would be arrogant. The Vulcan would die. Now he watched his predictions come true, and it made him feel sick. Through his instruments, he could see the moment when the Vulcan fleet realized the truth. Their tight formation broke apart. Ships scattered in every direction, desperately trying to escape. Some tried to turn and fight back. Others attempted to flee toward the edge of the solar system. A few simply stopped moving, their crews paralyzed by shock and fear. It didn't matter what they did. Earth's response had been planned for every possibility. Back in the command center, Admiral Hyun-woo watched the tactical display update in real time. Of the 300 ships that had entered his solar system, fewer than half remained. And only 11 seconds had passed. Captain Minji looked at him, her face pale. Admiral, final weapon authorization required for Project Watcher. Hyun-woo took a deep breath. Project Watcher was humanity's darkest secret. Artificial intelligence constructs so advanced they bordered on genuine consciousness. They had been forbidden by international law, but when faced with extinction, laws became flexible. These AI minds had one purpose: to calculate perfect military solutions. They thought faster than any human. They coordinated better than any general. They killed more efficiently than any army in history. Authorization granted, Hyun-woo said quietly. He entered his command code. Then he waited for Captain Minji to enter hers. Then Lieutenant Commander Ji-woo. Then 3 other senior officers. 5 separate codes, 5 separate people, all agreeing to unleash something that frightened them almost as much as the alien invasion. Across the solar system, the Watch Array is activated. They saw everything. They calculated everything. And in a span of time too short for humans to measure, they created a perfect firing solution for every remaining Vulcan ship. At second 10, humanity's final strike began. The Watcher A saw the battlefield as a mathematical problem. 123 remaining enemy ships. 17 different weapon systems spread across 400 million kilometers of space. Thousands of variables including velocity, trajectory, shield strength, and structural weak points. The A's processed all of this in less time than it took a human heart to beat once. Then they executed the perfect solution. Railguns buried on Jupiter's moons fired first. These weren't ordinary weapons. The projectiles they launched were accelerated to 3% of light speed, wrapped in magnetic fields that kept them stable during their journey through space. Each projectile was a simple rod of tungsten titanium alloy, but at those speeds, simplicity was devastating. 16 Velcrin ships were hit before their sensors even registered the attack. The rods punched through shields, through armor, through the ships themselves and out the other side. Everything in the path of those projectiles ceased to exist. Hull metal vaporized. Crew members turned to pink mist. Power cores ruptured in secondary explosions that tore the vessels apart from the inside. Commander Tai soon watched his fleet die ship by ship. The tactical display updated too fast to follow. Red icons disappeared one after another, each one representing thousands of lives. His hands gripped the arms of his command chair so hard his claws left marks in the metal. Shields to maximum. He shouted, "All power to engines. We have to get out of here." But the eternal conquest wasn't moving fast enough. Nothing was fast enough. From the Kuiper Belt, at the frozen edge of the solar system, missiles launched. These were relativistic kill vehicles, unmanned projectiles that had been waiting in the dark for decades. They accelerated for only a few seconds, but those seconds brought them to 40% of light speed. At those velocities, they didn't need warheads. Mass and velocity were all the destruction they required. 20-7 more. Velcrin ships disappeared in flashes of light so bright they could have been seen from Earth with the naked eye if anyone had been looking. When something moving at nearly half the speed of light hits something else, both objects simply convert to energy. The laws of physics are absolute, and they don't care about shields or armor or how advanced a species thinks it is. Lieutenant Sujin in Antarctica watched her power systems drop to zero as every last reserve of stored solar energy was unleashed. Focused neutrino beams, invisible and unstoppable, cut through space itself. Unlike normal matter, neutrinos pass through everything. They could travel through a light year of solid lead without slowing down. But these neutrinos have been specially tuned. When they passed through the reactor cores of Velcrin ships, they triggered specific nuclear reactions. The cores didn't just fail. They detonated. 18 ships turned into miniature suns, burning bright and brief before fading away. On Mars, Junho couldn't look away from his screens. He was a scientist, trained to observe and document. But he was also human, and what he was witnessing made him want to cry. The Velcrin had come as conquerors. They deserved what they got. But deserving something didn't make it any less horrible. Through his telescopes, he could see escape pods launching from some of the dying ships. Tiny vessels carrying desperate survivors trying to flee the massacre. His hands moved toward the communication panel, ready to send a message to Earth Command. Maybe they could spare the escape pods. Maybe there could be some mercy in this slaughter. Then his screen showed him what the Watcher A's had already calculated. The escape pods weren't just carrying survivors. They were armed. Each one had enough firepower to level a city. The Velcrin weren't trying to escape. They were trying to get close enough to Earth to do some damage before they died. Junho's hand moved away from the communication panel. He understood. In war, mercy could kill you. The escape pods were destroyed. All of them. Precision laser strikes from orbital platforms, each beam no wider than a human hair, but carrying enough energy to boil steel. The pods popped like bubbles, their contents scattered into the void. At second 11, only 32 Velcrin ships remained. They had scattered across a vast area of space, no longer a fleet but individual vessels running for their lives. Some tried to activate their faster-than-light drives, hoping to escape into hyperspace. Others simply fired wildly in every direction, hoping to hit something. Anything. The Watcher A had predicted every move. Specialist Dayhine sat in the orbital command station above Earth, watching his role in the finale. The platform he controlled housed the gravitational manipulation system, an experimental weapon that humanity wasn't even sure would work. It had never been tested at full power, because the tests kept accidentally creating small black holes. Now it was time to find out what it could really do. Firing gravitational distortion wave, Dayhine reported. His voice cracked slightly. He was 24 years old and had just become responsible for killing more people than had died in most Earth wars. The weapon activated. Space itself rippled like fabric caught in a wind. The ripple expanded outward in a perfect sphere, invisible but undeniable. When it reached the fleeing Velcrin ships, it didn't destroy them. It moved them into the path of every other weapon still firing. Railgun projectiles that would have missed suddenly had targets in front of them. Laser beams that were aimed at empty space now intersected with ship hulls. Missiles that were running out of fuel found themselves close enough to detonate effectively. In 3 seconds, 30 ships died. The last 2 Velcrin vessels were the Eternal Conquest and a heavy cruiser called the Iron Talon. Both ships had their best commanders at the helm. Both had managed through skill and luck to avoid the coordinated onslaught. Both were accelerating hard toward the edge of the solar system, shields at maximum. Every defensive system active. In the command center beneath Switzerland, Admiral Heian Wu watched the 2 remaining ships flee. He could let them go. 2 ships out of 300 wasn't a threat. They could escape, carry word of what happened here, warn the rest of the Velcrin Dominion that Earth was not to be trifled with. Captain Minji looked at him, waiting for orders. Her finger hovered over the control that would let the ships go or would finish what they'd started. Heian-Wu thought about the 47 species the Velcrin had conquered. He thought about the intelligence reports that described those conquests. The Velcrin didn't take prisoners of war. They took slaves. They didn't negotiate surrender. They demanded absolute submission. And they never, ever let an enemy escape to regroup and fight another day. No survivors, Heian-Wu said. The words tasted like ashes in his mouth. If we let them go, they'll come back with a bigger fleet. Finish it, Minji nodded. She understood. She didn't like it, but she understood. Her hands moved across the controls one last time. The moon's gravitational lances fired twice more. 2 perfect shots across millions of kilometers of space. The targeting was so precise that the beams missed every piece of debris, every asteroid, every molecule that wasn't part of a Velcrin warship. Commander Taesung had just enough time to realize what was happening. His sensors screamed a warning. His weapons officer shouted something urgent. His pilot tried to execute one last evasive maneuver. The Eternal Conquest collapsed into nothing, taking its commander and 5,000 crew members with it. The Iron Talon died the same way. A heartbeat later. And then it was over. The solar system fell silent. Where 300 warships had cast shadows across space just 11 seconds ago, there was only debris. Expanding clouds of vaporized metal. Frozen corpses tumbling slowly in the void. Broken pieces of ships that would drift for millions of years before gravity pulled them into a sun or planet. Lieutenant Commander Ji Woo stared at her screens, watching the sensor data confirm what her mind couldn't quite process. 300 enemy contacts reduced to 0. 11 seconds from start to finish. The entire battle had lasted less time than it took to boil water for tea. She felt someone's hand on her shoulder. Admiral Heian Wu stood beside her, his old face lined with exhaustion. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 11 seconds. "Sound the all clear," he said quietly. "Send the evacuation end signal. Let people know they can go home." Ji Woo nodded and began typing the commands. All over Earth, in bunkers and shelters, 8 billion people would soon receive the message that the invasion was over. Most of them didn't even know the battle had happened. It had been too fast for the news to report. Too fast for social media to spread the word. Too fast for anything except a cold, efficient machinery of war. Captain Minji sat in her station, her hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. She had just coordinated the deaths of hundreds of thousands of living beings. That they were enemies didn't change the fact that they had been alive, with thoughts and feelings and families waiting for them somewhere in the distant stars. She would remember this for the rest of her life. Every face she'd seen in the intelligence briefings. Every ship icon disappearing from the tactical display. Every life ended by decisions she'd helped make. Specialist Daehyun removed his headset and stood up on unsteady legs. He walked to the window of his orbital station and looked down at Earth, beautiful and blue and still whole. They'd won. They'd protected their home. But he didn't feel like celebrating. The hours after the battle were strange and quiet. On Earth, people emerged from shelters confused about what had happened. The news networks struggled to explain an invasion that had been announced and defeated before most people even knew to be afraid. Social media exploded with theories and questions and demands for information. In the command center beneath Switzerland, Admiral Han Wu and his team worked through the aftermath. Damage reports came in from across the solar system. A few defense platforms had been hit by wildfire from the Velcran fleet. 3 installations on the moon needed repairs. An automated station near Mars had been destroyed by debris. But considering what they'd just faced, the losses were minimal. Almost miraculous. The human cost was even lighter. 7 technicians injured when a power surge blew out some equipment. No deaths. Not a single civilian casualty. Earth had been attacked by a fleet that had conquered 47 worlds, and humanity hadn't lost a single life. But hundreds of thousands of Velcran were dead. That number sat heavy in the room like a physical presence. Captain Minji stood at her station, running diagnostics on the weapon systems. Her hands moved automatically through the checks while her mind was far away. She kept seeing those ships collapse, kept thinking about the crews inside them. Were they afraid in those last moments? Did they have families? Children waiting for parents who would never come home. Lieutenant Commander Ji Woo interrupted her thoughts. "Captain, we're detecting multiple hyperspace signatures. Long-range sensors show ships emerging at the heliopause." Every head in the command center turned toward the main display. The holographic image showed dozens, then hundreds of new contacts, appearing at the very edge of the solar system, where the sun's influence faded into interstellar space. "How many?" Admiral Han Wu asked, his voice calm despite the tension in his shoulders. Ji Woo worked her controls, pulling in data from the Deep Space Network. "Current count is 473 ships, sir. And they're still coming. They're staying at the heliopause, not advancing. Just waiting." Specialist Daehyun pulled up identification data. "They're Velcran. Different design than the invasion fleet. These look like capital ships, dreadnoughts. This isn't an invasion force. It's their main battle fleet." The entire Velcran Dominion had just arrived at Earth's doorstep, and they were watching. Admiral Han Wu studied the display in silence. He understood immediately what was happening. The invasion fleet had been sending data back to the Dominion in real time. When communication cut out, the main fleet came to investigate. They'd arrived just in time to see the end of the battle. Now they knew. They knew what Earth could do. They knew that humanity wasn't a primitive species waiting to be conquered. They were something far more dangerous. "They're afraid," Haiyan-Wu said softly. "Good. Fear can lead to wisdom." He turned to Gi-Wu. "Open a channel. Broadcast on all frequencies. I want every ship in that fleet to hear this. I want every species in this region of space to hear this." Ji-Wu's fingers flew across her keyboard. "Channel open, Admiral. You're broadcasting to the fleet and beyond. The signal will reach neighboring star systems in a matter of hours." Haiyan-Wu straightened his uniform and faced the camera. He thought carefully about his words. This message would define humanity's relationship with the wider galaxy. It needed to be perfect. "This is Admiral Haiyan-Wu of Earth's Unified Defense Command. I address the Velcrin fleet at our borders and any species listening to this transmission." He paused, letting his words carry the weight they needed. Humanity sought only peace. For 40 years, we watched the Velcrin expand toward our system. We saw what happened to the species that fell before them. We sent messages offering friendship and trade. We received no response. We asked only to be left alone. That request was denied. On the screen behind him, footage of the battle played, every moment recorded in perfect clarity. The alien fleet arriving, the warning sent, the refusal to leave, and then the 11 seconds that changed everything. The Velcrin came to our home with weapons drawn. They demanded we surrender or face extinction. We gave them a final warning. They ignored it. You have witnessed the result. Earth is not a prey world. We are not easy victims. We will not bow to conquerors. Captain Minji had prepared the second part of the broadcast, and now it began transmitting. Complete sensor data from the battle. Specifications of every weapon system used. Proof of humanity's capabilities. No lies, no exaggerations. Just cold, hard facts. "We take no pleasure in the destruction you witnessed," Haiyan-Wu continued. "Every life lost today weighs on our conscience. But we will not apologize for defending our world. We will not regret choosing survival over submission." He let that sink in before delivering the most important part of the message. "Earth is not your enemy unless you make us your enemy. Any species that approaches our system in peace will be welcomed as friends. We will share our knowledge, our culture, our resources. We seek alliance with those who respect sovereignty and peace. But understand this clearly. Any species that comes to our world with weapons drawn will face the same fate as the Velcrin invasion fleet. Choose wisely." The broadcast ended. Throughout the solar system, every defense installation received the signal. Every hidden weapon platform, every orbital station. The message was clear to anyone who understood military positioning. Earth defenses were still active, still ready, still watching. On the Velcrin flagship at the heliopause, Fleet Commander Corvang watched the human broadcast for the third time. He was older than Taesung had been, more experienced, more cautious. He'd built his reputation on careful planning and overwhelming force. Now he was facing something unprecedented. 300 warships had been destroyed in 11 seconds. 11 seconds. His tactical officers had analyzed the battle data the humans had transmitted. The analysis was terrifying. Earth hadn't used even half of its defensive capabilities. Those 11 seconds represented restraint, not full power. "What do we do, Commander?" his second asked. "We could attack. We outnumber their visible defenses." Corvang shook his head slowly. "We outnumber the defenses we can see. How many more are hidden? How many more weapons did they not reveal? We came to investigate. We have our answer. Earth is not worth the cost." He turned to his communications officer. "Signal the fleet. We're returning home. No hostile actions. Make it clear we're leaving peacefully. But Commander, the Council will demand vengeance for the Council can demand whatever they want from the safety of the homeworld. Corving interrupted. I'm not throwing away the entire fleet for pride. Earth made its position clear. I'm wise enough to listen. The Velcrin fleet began to withdraw, ships disappearing into hyperspace one by one. They would return home with stories in a small blue world that had killed an invasion force faster than most battles took to properly begin. In the command center on Earth, Lieutenant Commander Ji Woo watched the alien contacts disappear from her screens. They're leaving, Admiral. All ships are withdrawing. A collective breath was released throughout the room. The immediate crisis was over. But everyone knew this was just the beginning. The galaxy now knew about Earth. Some species would hear the message and seek friendship. Others would hear it as a challenge. Admiral Haiyan Wu turned to his team. Begin Phase 2. Captain Minji. I want all weapon systems maintained at 70% readiness. We need to be ready for anything, but I don't want us to look too aggressive. Understood, sir. Lieutenant Commander Ji Woo, start monitoring for responses to our broadcast. Any species trying to make contact needs to be evaluated carefully. Some will be genuine. Others might be scouts for future attacks. Yes, Admiral. Haiyan Wu looked around the command center at the tired, strained faces of his people. They'd just achieved an impossible victory. They'd saved Earth from conquest. And they were all wondering the same thing. What comes next? We did what we had to do, he said quietly. We protected our home. Now we need to prove that we're worth the peace we're fighting for. Earth showed its teeth today. Tomorrow, we show its heart. On Mars, Junho was already composing his analysis of the Velcrin fleet's withdrawal. His report would be titled, The Psychology of Overwhelming Force. How Strength Can Create Peace. He believed it. Had to believe it. Because if strength only created more violence, then today's victory was meaningless. In Antarctica, Lieutenant Sujin oversaw the recharge procedures for the solar collection arrays. It would take months to store enough energy for another full discharge. She hoped they'd never need it again. High above Earth, Specialist Dai Haiyan looked down at his homeworld and thought about the message Admiral Haiyan Wu had sent. Any species that comes in peace will be welcomed. Any that comes with weapons will be destroyed. It was a simple philosophy. Maybe too simple for a complex galaxy, but it was honest. And right now, honesty was all humanity had to offer. The stars still glittered in the darkness, beautiful and dangerous and full of possibilities. Earth had announced its presence to the galaxy in the loudest way possible. Now they would discover if anyone was interested in listening. 3 months after the battle that lasted 11 seconds, the galaxy had changed in ways both subtle and profound. News of Earth's victory had spread across dozens of star systems, carried by traders and travelers and the Velcrin themselves. Some species dismissed the reports as exaggeration. Others took the message seriously and began adjusting their calculations about humanity. The Velcrin dominion itself was fracturing. Subject species that had lived under their rule for generations suddenly saw a weakness in their masters. Rebellions broke out on 12 worlds. 3 colonial governors declared independence. The empire that had seemed unshackable was discovering that reputation mattered more than anyone had realized. On Earth, the aftermath of victory was less celebratory than anyone expected. Admiral Haiyan Wu stood before the United Earth Assembly in Geneva, answering questions that felt more like accusations. Counselor Hae-won, a sharp-faced woman from Korea, leaned forward in her seat. Admiral, you build weapon systems in secret. Weapons capable of destroying entire fleets. You did this without public knowledge or oversight. Explain why we should trust you. Haiyan Wu had expected this question, had prepared for it. But preparation didn't make it easier to answer. Counselor, 40 years ago, our long-range probes detected the Velcrin expansion. We saw species after species fall. We watched them be conquered, enslaved, destroyed. And we realized that Earth had two choices: hope for peace or prepare for war. We chose both. He gestured to the holographic display showing Earth's defense network. These systems were built with approval from the Security Council. Yes, the public didn't know the full extent. But if everyone had known, the Velcrin would have known. Surprise was our greatest weapon. If we'd advertised our capabilities, they would have come prepared or not come at all, leaving us isolated and alone in a hostile galaxy. Counselor Young-Su from China stood up, his voice tight with anger. But at what cost? You've turned Earth into a military fortress. You've made us a threat to galactic peace. We're no better than the Velcrin now. That's not true, Hyan-Wu said quietly. The Velcrin conquered 47 species. We destroyed one fleet that came to conquer us. There's a difference between defense and aggression. A difference between protecting your home and invading someone else's. The debate continued for hours. Some counselors supported the Admiral's actions. Others demanded his resignation. In the end, no conclusions were reached. The Assembly voted to form a committee to study the matter further, which was politician speak for postponing any real decisions. As Hyan-Wu left the Assembly building, Captain Minji was waiting for him. She looked different in civilian clothes. She'd resigned from the military 2 weeks after the battle, unable to continue after what she'd done. How did it go? She asked. About as well as expected, Hyan-Wu replied. They're angry, confused, and afraid. Can't blame them. They walked together through Geneva's old streets. 2 people carrying the weight of 11 seconds that saved 8 billion lives. Do you regret it? Minji asked quietly. Any of it? Hyan-Wu thought about the question carefully. I regret that it was necessary. I regret every life lost. But I don't regret protecting Earth. If given the same choice again, I'd make the same decision. Minji nodded slowly. I'm not sure I could. That's why I left. I can't be the person who presses that button again. Then teach others to avoid having to press it, Hyan-Wu suggested. You're working at the academy now. Teach the next generation when to fight and when to find another way. That's just as important as knowing how to fight. They parted ways at a tram station. Minji headed to Seoul, where she now taught military ethics and tactical theory. She'd turned her experience into lessons, helping cadets understand the reality of war beyond the simulations and theoretical exercises. Her students asked her the same question in every class. What was it like? She always gave them the same answer. Terrible. Necessary. And something you should spend your career trying to avoid. Every death in war is a failure of diplomacy, understanding, or imagination. But when avoidance fails, when all other options are exhausted, you have a duty to end the fight quickly and decisively. Quick wars are kinder than long ones. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Commander Ji-Woo had been promoted to commander and given command of Earth's first diplomatic vessel, the Olive Branch. The ship was unarmed except for basic defensive shields. Its hold was full of gifts, advanced medical technology, agricultural data, cultural databases, music, art, and literature from every human civilization. Her mission was simple: find friendly species and make first contact properly this time. Her first stop was the Malith Confederation, a group of 7 species that had maintained independence through careful diplomacy and defensive alliances. She met their chief ambassador, Telvis, in a space station orbiting their capital world. Telvis was tall and thin with skin that looked like polished stone. Their eyes, all 6 of them, studied Ji-Woo carefully. Commander Ji-Woo of Earth, you've caused quite a disturbance in our region of space. We defended ourselves, Ji-Woo replied calmly. Would your people have done differently? No, Telvis admitted. But we also wouldn't have revealed so much of our capability. You showed the galaxy your strength. Now comes the difficult part. convincing everyone you won't use it for conquest. Ji Woo smiled slightly. That's why I'm here. My ship carries no weapons except shields. We come offering friendship, knowledge, and trade. Earth seeks allies, not subjects. Words are cheap, Telvis said. The Velkrin used similar words when they first arrived in this region. They spoke of cooperation right up until the moment they didn't. Then judge us by our actions, Ji Woo countered. We're willing to share technology that could improve lives across your confederation. We're offering defensive alliances if you want them. All we ask in return is the chance to prove we're sincere. Telvis studied her for a long moment. Your species plays a dangerous game, Commander. You've revealed your strength. Now everyone will be watching to see if you use it wisely or foolishly. I know, Ji Woo said. That's why I'm here instead of a fleet. My people believe in speaking softly and carrying a big stick. You've seen the stick. Now let me speak softly. The negotiations took weeks, but eventually the Malith Confederation agreed to a preliminary trade agreement and cultural exchange. It was a small step, but an important one. Earth had made its first true ally among the stars. On Mars, Junho continued his work as a xenopsychologist, but now he had access to real alien contacts instead of just data and theories. The Confederation had agreed to let him interview representatives from their member species, studying how different cultures approached questions of war, peace, and coexistence. His reports were read by every major government on Earth, understanding how aliens thought wasn't just academic anymore. It was survival. One report stood out on the nature of galactic relations. In it, Junho argued that the galaxy operated on a principle of demonstrated capability. Species that seemed weak were attacked. Species that proved their strength were respected, at least until something stronger came along. Earth must walk a careful line, he wrote. We must remain strong enough that no one dares attack us, but not so aggressive that we provoke preemptive strikes from worried neighbors. We must be the friendly neighbor who everyone knows has a very good security system. In Antarctica, Lieutenant Su Jin had been promoted to chief engineer and given responsibility for maintaining the solar collection arrays. The capacitors were recharging slowly, day by day. She hoped they'd never need to be used again, but she kept them ready just in case. She'd also started a new project, a memorial. On the moon, near one of the gravitational lance installations, she convinced her superiors to build a simple wall. On it, they carved the names of every Velkrin crew member who died in the battle. When asked why she wanted to memorialize the enemy, Su Jin said, because they were people too. They came here following orders, believing they were serving their empire. They were wrong, but that doesn't mean they deserve to be forgotten. Memory is how we stay human. The memorial became a quiet place where Earth's defenders came to reflect. Specialist Daehyun visited it once a month. He would stand there reading names he couldn't pronounce from a culture he didn't understand, remembering that war had costs beyond victory and defeat. Admiral Hyun Woo visited the memorial on the day of his retirement. He was 70 years old and ready to let someone else carry the burden. His replacement was Admiral Young Min, a brilliant strategist who had been preparing for this role for a decade. They stood together at the memorial wall, 2 generations of defenders. Any advice? Young Min asked. Hyun Woo looked out at the lunar landscape, gray and ancient, and now armed with weapons that could crack worlds. Remember what those 11 seconds cost. Remember the weight of every decision. And if the day comes when you must make the same choice I did, remember why we built these weapons in the first place. To survive, Young Min said. No, Hyun Woo corrected gently. To protect. Survival is selfish. Protection is about something larger than yourself. We didn't destroy that fleet to survive. We destroyed it to protect 8 billion people who depend on us to make the hard choices so they don't have to. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. You'll face pressures to use our strength proactively.